An
It'd be good
XM5.
good to use a multitude of headphones when you're recording podcasts or listening to music or just watching anime.
Yeah, I mean, it's a luxury for sure.
Do you listen to music when you read manga actually, or do you like just full like zone in, nothing else, just whatever's in your hand, whether it's like the manga itself, like book form, or if you're reading on your iPad?
So what I do with the iPad Mini is even worse, which is I would have a YouTube video, but usually I would minimize it because my mom wanted YouTube Premium, so I bought it for her and obviously shared it with the family.
So you have like the in display
Correct.
YouTube, whilst you have your manga panels like in the background.
Well,
I mean, in the sense that like you have a floating little YouTube video player,
Yeah,
but the majority of it is the manga itself.
like 90%, especially because the screen, the YouTube like window, you can like minimize it so it's like the smallest version.
Yeah,
So-
I usually have something playing in the background, but like more often than not, it's like just like a random YouTube clip, maybe a podcast like the GAP.
Either that or like VODs, right? As in like a streamer archived kind of thing. So what's up, guys? It has been over a minute, but welcome back. This is Bits and Pieces.
Yeah, so I think we did one not too long ago regarding, the previous one was regarding sort of like sentimental anime and manga or just series that mean a lot to us, though they may not necessarily be the most popular or the most watched or viewed. And then the one before that was talking about the usage of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, language modeling in terms of how it could potentially affect the production of anime and manga.
Actually, that's BP number 15. BP number 16 is...
Yeah, sentimental anime and manga.
Nope, that's BP number 17. BP 16 is about choices for like B tier and top tier anime.
How do you go about choosing anime and manga?
Correct, yeah. And like the lack of time, use of time.
We did AI that long ago?
Yeah.
Wow.
Very, very popular bits and pieces. Thanks, guys, for...
That's the algorithm working, right?
It is. What if that's what they want?
By the way, before we actually go into what we want to discuss for today's BP, unfortunately, there is a little bit of handiwork going around in the area. We are not a full-blown soundproofed studio just yet, so you will hear occasional, hammering on nails, maybe a drill bit going every now and then, but we will have to make do. So apologies ahead of time, but the show must still go on. So
yeah,
I think one thing we've talked about a lot in terms of, at least specifically this season, was in general sort of like getting an understanding of the anime and manga landscape. Things that are doing really well, things that are really, really popular. Very clearly we also did a bits and pieces talking about decade-defining, genre-defining decades, like what was popular in like the 80s and 90s and what is... our predictions of upcoming genres that could potentially displace, shonen actions, isekais, and whatnot.
To be fair, my decade-defining like choices and picks were not necessarily actually based on prediction as much as what I want to kind of. I mean, it is grounded in some sort of reasoning.
Like you want some more like deeper, thought-provoking seinens, things that kind of push
Josei,
things that push beyond like what we currently appreciate, what is currently popular. And that's actually kind of what I wanted to sort of go into for today's discussion, in that with the way that people enjoy anime and manga, it's very clear that if we just like don't even care about like the top 10 in terms of like raw scores for anime and manga on my anime list, if we look at the popularity, right, I think it's very clear that stuff like Naruto, Monogatari, Steins Gate, JoJo, Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, like very clearly the last 5 years, the big hits in terms of shonen action has always been on everybody's radar. It's very rare that people aren't talking about these series. But one thing that I'm kind of not really annoyed, but like one thing I wish there was a bit of a change is that perhaps there'd be less of a focus on shonen actions and maybe shining a spotlight on lesser known genres, or maybe like trying something that's a little bit, against the grain, a little bit not so like following current trends. This is I know we've done an episode about anime originals before, but even then I still felt that like a lot of stuff that's come out, at least from like an original kind of perspective, still was similar to the sort of things that we know and love. And one thing that I guess in terms of like the main question I want to propose to you is, do you
you're proposing to me now?
Well, I mean that could potentially happen down the road. Who knows? We've only, we're 2.5 years into GAP. Maybe after year 3, we'll have to pop that question. But back onto like the main problem that we have right now is, do you feel that we're just rehashing shit in terms of just anime and manga now? Like, think about like the big hitters of the last 5 years in terms of Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, and now, I mean, depending on when this releases, Hell's Paradise. All very popular, all very well received series, but it's kind of hard to really like discern what like the major differences are across the series outside of maybe some thematic stuff, sometimes character backgrounds. It's still very much, bloody, gory, violent, action-packed,
or isekais, right? For the time being, like this past decade, obviously.
And this is not a slate on the general anime and manga populace. I get, of course, that if things are popular, there must be a reason as to why it's popular. It is not just for the sake of being number one or being the best selling and whatnot. But are we in danger of potentially just diluting the pool and just not really breaking beyond just rehashing the similar kinds of shonen actions, similar kinds of isekais? Or do you think that because of the fact that they are just good, that they are meant to be in the in the zeitgeist across every possible creation of anime and manga, that's just the path that we will naturally go towards, and that anything else is always going to be a struggle to at least try and put it on a similar, if not higher pedestal than shonen actions, isekais, or what is the most popular current series, and possibly like dictating how the future will look for anime and manga?
So I think shonen action will always have the spotlight and a mainstay for any given season, almost for the foreseeable future. I think its mass appeal, especially when produced and done very well, and based off of, Shonen Jump or other properties that have a lot of hype behind it already, makes it extremely palatable and easily accessible. So I think especially, if we go all the way back, a lot of anime and cartoons, its main purpose is to either A, appeal to kids, and B, merchandising with, Beyblade, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon, and so on and so forth. So I think it is, unfortunately or fortunately, or just the way it is, shonen is always going to be relevant, if not prominent, in any given anime season.
Yeah, I think it also like speaks to it as well in terms of like the biggest sponsors of anime and manga, which are like Shonen Jump. I mean, the whole shonen platform literally has half of shonen action in its name, right? Then you also have Bandai Namco. You also have a bunch of media and gaming companies that usually appeal to.
What was it? Ume Musume? Is it called Psy Games?
Yeah, CY, Games.
And CyberConnect does a lot of the Naruto games, the Naruto fighting games. Sorry about the
nails,
the nail and hammering. So yeah, I think it is almost, I cannot foresee a timeline of future where shonen action is not relevant and not a mainstay. Also, it needs to make money, right? And I would argue that we obviously do not focus a lot on the more kid-ish, like Beyblade anime or Yu-Gi-Oh, or those types of like Sentai, the robots.
A lot of them are pretty much like backed by Bandai Namco because they would be the biggest proponent in getting merchandise, toys, and other kinds of sellable products to the general public.
The only exception within what I just said, even though it is Bandai Namco, is Gundam, right? Because that's pretty much in the zeitgeist.
It's historic, right?
Exactly. So I would say the prevalence of merchandising in terms of like toys has not been very relevant, at least to us. And even more so, I guess, when you focus on like Demon Slayer and all of these other properties where there really isn't a merchandise. Of course, I'm excluding like figurines and stuff like that. That is very much a big deal everywhere. But I just meant like the Beyblades, if you will.
Yeah.
So it needs to make money.
Yeah, I think therefore then like that kind of answers one particular part of that question, in which it's a necessity, right? Like, these companies are all for profit. They're not doing it for the good of mankind,
Yeah.
as much as you wish for them to be like trying to push the culture onto the mainstream and get more eyes on it to be able to develop the industry. That is like too much of a holistic perspective.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. And also, you might argue, like, okay, let's say, for argument's sake, an animation studio decides to not really focus on shonen properties or anything that you would characterize as a trait of shonen properties. Then you're not going to get all of the animation studios collectively to be like, oh yeah, okay, we're not going to do this.
Yeah. But then, like, when you start focusing on the fact that, of course, this is all supposed to be like revenue generating, therefore, you're going to see creators, specifically mangakas, pile onto the popular genres because they know that there's enough eyes on it that all you need is that one hit, and then you can break into the industry. But my fear is that at some point we would then start developing a lack of innovation in terms of what is the appeal of shonen action other than the fact that it purely is just a shonen action. Like if we just make a very straightforward comparison between like Jujutsu Kaisen, Hell's Paradise, Demon Slayer,
Chainsaw Man, yeah,
all very good series. I mean, I really love all of them, but like, they're all kind of similar, right? I mean, of course, to say that they're the same, that's like too short-sighted. That's not what I'm getting at,
and disingenuous. But I'm not saying you are doing that.
I think
yeah.
exactly right. Like, for me to just say that, that's just completely wrong. But I could be forgiven in saying that there are a lot of similarities in terms of how characters are developed, how power levels are developed and portrayed, and sort of the general flow of plot. In that there is always going to be a big bad evil and a good person building together an entourage to try and take down this big bad evil. But after a while, I feel it gets a little bit formulaic, and are we just forever destined to just kind of see similar stuff just in a different skin, like same shit different day kind of situation?
And to add on to what you said, right, let's take the more quote unquote mature, which is by definition seinen, right? The seinen demographic or the seinen genre is by definition, that's exactly what it means. It means a more mature audience, right? Let's take currently, it is spring 2023, My Home Hero. It is, in my opinion, a seinen.
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely is. I mean, forgive the portrayal. I mean, the representation it had in the anime. The manga itself looks fucking sick. It's just sometimes
the art is great.
Sometimes when you have to do seinen adaptations, you do have a lot more red tape to go around. That's unfortunately the way it goes in the industry, and therefore I think that the score and the perception of My Home Hero definitely took a hit.
I mean, let's exclude how you and I feel about the production side of it, right? Let's just talk about the plot beats. The first 10 minutes is kind of gut-wrenching because it kind of touches on obviously a lot of things that seinen would touch on, but it is kind of very uncomfortable, right? It's something that akin to...
It's weird, it's obscure, it's uncomfortable. You're never really knowing what's actually happening when they get the characters, but something's brewing in the background. And then when it all comes out, when the shit hits the fan, then it's like, okay, this is the real shit.
I mean, the first scene, it takes place in a diner, and someone shows up late, battered, and bruised. I mean, that is very much, what's up.
But the fact that the characters are also very non-confrontational about it, it's like,
and they know what's up.
What happened? Oh, that
You have
happened.
to read in between the
Oh,
lines,
you're not gonna
right?
tell. Okay, you're not gonna tell me. Okay, that's cool. That's fine. That's cool. Okay, fine. Would you like to order anything to eat? I'm good. I'm not gonna eat. And then she just walks off. It's like, okay, all right. Then you get out of the diner, and then another conflict happens, and this time around, it's a lot more in your face.
Yeah, I don't think that whole, like the first half of the first episode is something that a lot of people will sought, to go after. Whereas if I say something like, yo, imagine you fight demons or devils in this world, but you use chainsaw for hands, you'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's anime as fuck. I mean, we literally say that as, oh, we use swords to fight demons. We wear masks, and there is like a organization, a society of people where they go hunt demons. It's like, yeah, that sounds anime as fuck. I mean, we don't say, oh, 91 Days set in the Prohibition era is an anime as fuck revenge tale.
No, it is a very like sort of as realistic as can be portrayal of the Prohibition times.
But it's a great. I mean, I thought it was okay, but I really do appreciate.
Yeah,
the tone.
It wasn't fantastic, but I think it's because of the fact that it's still kind of grounded in some level of realism that it can't push that fantastical boundary.
Like, what was the last seinen? And I guess you could argue that Attack on Titan is a seinen, but I would also argue it is fantastical and action oriented. But when was the last? When was the last like pure seinen that you can think of that has reached a huge appeal?
Monster.
Now, okay, that's a very good one. That's a legit very good one, but that's also like a legit very ancient one.
Classic. I mean, you can't really say it's like contemporary anymore, right? It came out like almost like well over 20 years ago.
Then you could say like Oshi no Ko, and I'm like, you're not like wrong per se, but it's also like it's not a seinen. It's a shonen jump.
Would you say Shinsekai Yori from A New World is a seinen?
Yeah,
thematically,
it's
very seinen.
Yes, I would say.
And
so.
yes, it's fantastical. And
plus, it's based off of a novel, so
yeah.
But the other thing, though, I would argue in like on your argument of, well, what are we going to do about it? What was it? The 2 points I talk about is a mass appeal, so it's easy to like associate with in terms of a broad audience. The second thing is they got to make money. What makes money now? Isekais, shonens. Good. Okay. So you can't stop companies from making money, or else then we don't get anime, period. So what I would argue is the number of people that grow up that loves anime and manga, I mean, we have said it to death, it's ever going to be increasing. So then they will sought after, hopefully, seinens.
You mean they'll seek after?
Seek.
Yeah.
Sought is okay. Yes.
Tense, yeah.
Yeah, my bad.
But I think like the parallel to it in terms of like IRL, like live action, would be Disney. Right? In terms of like every 20 years, how like you've had the classics of Lion King, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. Then 20 years later, they either do 3D or live action remakes of it. Same shit, but it's literally just an upscaled, updated version of it. And when you talk about all the Marvel movies that come under the Disney banner, it's always sort of like PG or PG-13. But then when they try and push for an R-rated Deadpool, that there's a lot of sort of like push and shove, a lot of red tape from the higher ups because they feel that having an R-rated movie, whilst of course it would encapsulate the purest sort of comedic and also excitement level.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan Reynolds had to fucking fight in order to literally get it greenlit.
Because Disney is like, well, we don't want to alienate people who are younger from watching it. Therefore, like our bottom line is going to be a lot lower. But then also at the same time, it's like, well, then you're just basically, censoring a lot of shit that just would not make this. You would sanitize the whole experience.
I mean, thank God in the end that Ryan Reynolds got his way and everyone loved Deadpool. But I have to. There needs to be like some sort of way to tell like these execs like, oh yeah, we done goofed, that kind of thing.
Do you think that that's a similar issue within anime and manga? Maybe less so with manga and especially with like light novels, because you can definitely see a lot more like deep and dark shit when it comes to written and just like manga forms. But when it comes to the getting it onto the screen for anime, yes, you do see like some real gory shit with Shinsekai Yori, with Chainsaw Man, Attack on Titan, but there's still, I guess, sort of a little bit of not so much censorship, but downplaying the level of violence and gore, and even like some more sensitive themes and topics in anime and manga.
I mean, we talk about uncensored versions versus censored versions that are on broadcast. I think in our Gotta Watch Them All for JoJo, I was like, there are some moments where they're clearly blacked out or like, like shaded in what is actually happening,
or like conveniently censored ways for you to sort of like what's going on, but because of they're acting under like a specific kind of like age rating.
Yeah, and it's not a director or not like some you see the typical thing of like the door closes and then you hear all these like sound effects, but this is not that. This is literally you could easily see in many ways, but they like blurred it out, right? Or but I think ecchi is very different than violence. And I think also in America, Western world, it is also played differently than, let's say, in Europe. So that's like a whole different can of worms and a different conversation entirely, right?
I think because I think it's a pretty apt kind of comparison between like Disney and not to say that Disney is in comparison to like all of anime and manga. That's not the parallel I'm trying to make.
So
what I'm saying here is that like, is it because of the fact that there are business decisions that need to be made that because they know that the general demographic that would be the most sort of like well received towards a specific genre, that's why they're going for more sort of like teenage, young adult kind of genres that would easily be popular, that would easily make money. And that's why we are resigned to seeing a lot of, unfortunately, like rehashed kinds of shonen actions.
I mean, the way that anime gets greenlit, at least from my perspective, with shonens in particular, they have a lot of background knowledge, right? They got the source manga in this case. Again, if we exclude anime originals that are more catered to shonens, let's just take, like Demon Slayer. You can see clearly that, it has a certain level of appeal with the manga. So then it is easier to convince a group of people to produce that anime. Then you go, okay, so those people will jump on. Then what do we add to that to convince a group of people to put in the money for it, right? I would argue that it is such a tall order that it's easy for example, me to play devil's advocate to be like, yeah, I want to see more varied types of stuff. That is not to say that the Demon Slayer is not well done or well produced, but I would 100% in an executive position of an anime studio or a production committee be like, yeah, fuck my home hero. I am just going to mass produce Fate Stay Night. I'm going to mass produce Demon Slayer. I want to get that money.
That's, I mean, I can't argue against that.
Yeah, and then you can then say, like, the anime will propel the manga sales of Shonen Jumps, and it becomes this, like, cycle. Like this, is it called cyclic effect?
Yeah, cyclical, yeah.
So it is such a hard thing to do. Like, for example, let's take the moon, Type Moon world, right? I'm very much convinced that we will get a Tsukihime anime soon. I mean, we already got the remake of the PS4 visual.
Probably 2025, if there is going to be one.
Ufotable has produced like a beginning intro scene that looks fucking fantastic with Riona, with the song. And it's just so well done that I'm just like, yeah, it's gonna come, guys. Like, it's so obvious to me. And also because Tsukihime, the last full anime production, didn't do too good. So
no, and that was a while ago too, right? I think that was like that.
That's like the Disney cycle, right?
I think that came out before Garden of Sinners, which came out like late 2000s.
Yeah, I think it was like 2002, 1, something like that. Like, so, but the only thing that it is, again, timing of certain things are just very coincidental, isn't it? That let's go off of anime and just kind of make a side tangent to video games. Currently, right now, a lot of ire has been drawn for Activision Blizzard King, right?
Yeah.
So, especially for both of us, when we used to play World of Warcraft, and especially like the prominence of Activision Blizzard, or back then just Blizzard, they have nonstop bangers, right? StarCraft, Warcraft, Diablo, World of Warcraft. Now we get like sequels, like Diablo 4 is coming out now and stuff like that, and Street Fighter 6, going off to Capcom, right? But at the end of the day, people complain, whine, make a lot of noise. Is that the majority of people, or even the people who make the noise? Are you going to then stop playing and vote with your wallet? Because that's literally how you incite change.
Yeah.
If you don't like what is currently being available, catered to you as an anime and manga viewer or reader, then don't buy them. But people will.
Like there's a reason why we have so many Fast and Furious movies. There's a reason.
It works.
Yeah. There's a reason why we have so many Modern Warfares, right? A Call of Duty franchise has been just like rinsing it, even though like year on year on year, they say that the game just gets worse and worse and worse.
And there's an IP as a franchise, right? So then it's easier for people to be like, oh, I'll greenlit the next one. They'll greenlit the next Battlefield, even though it in reality could be really bad, versus a new first-person shooter property.
I mean, they did have like Battlefield 1, right? I think it was kind of like a slight revamp because they took it back in time. But I mean, it was IA, but it was also hugely popular too. Enough for them to actually start making more games like that like that type. I think their subsequent like sequel came out and it wasn't
good. Yeah,
but it's like
the battle royale genre, right?
That's the kind of data you work with, right? If one thing worked, you want to extrapolate all the successes that came from it and put it towards the next thing.
Yeah,
and
or you want
it's like if it worked the first time, it has to work a second time.
Yeah, or you want to get in on it, or other studios wants to get a piece of that pie, right? So similarly with isekais, a lot of people is like, oh fuck, this genre is earning a shit ton of money. Who gives a shit? Like, okay, look, I'm pretty hyped about like Reborn as a vending machine. I don't think it will be like super good, but I still quite like it.
It's a slightly different kind of thing, but then it's like you've also seen like being reincarnated as an inanimate object, like
Ice Sorcerer, Ice Blade.
There's like reincarnated as a sword.
Yeah,
right.
There's like so many things that are just so mid, literally mid, but it gets greenlit. Because
people like it enough to pay for it, and like that, putting money in their coffers and being like, oh, clearly this is a strategy that works. We're going to continue doing that, and you keep doing it until it breaks.
Yeah, because you're not going to get someone who is like the stereotypical thing of the execs are being like old, in this case Asian dudes, right? That are in these exec positions. They don't have the pulse, at least a lot of them don't have the pulse on the way that things are going to be in the next 5 years. I mean, even animation studios, the creatives themselves don't know, right? So it's so tough. That's why no one does anime originals anymore compared to back in the day, because it's just so easy to be like, oh, there's a source. That's why I don't like character designers nowadays when they're adapted from manga, because look, I'm not saying that it's not an important like position or an important role, but you literally have like 90% of the work based from the manga source, right? Okay, you adapt it slightly.
And then, of course, if you do have a manga source and then you do character designs, but it looks different or like not the same at all, then people
what the fuck, guys?
Yeah, there's literally no win.
You're not being faithful.
Right? If like, for example,
fuck your own take.
You know how we have like best character design and it's literally just the same designs based off of manga, then you have people like us to be like, you're not designing a character, you're literally just copying and pasting and adding animations in between. And then on the inverse, if you make something completely different, you can draw a backlash and be like, why did this is not a faithful adaptation of the source.
Yeah, so it's very easy to say like, why are you guys not taking a more riskier route? But that's because it's riskier when
the word is there. Yeah,
exactly.
Like, do you want to put like $10 million into an anime series that is completely original, not done before, and may or may not work, versus putting $10 million into something that, oh, look, it's same old shit, but it's going to make you money.
I love talking about Studio Trigger and their general catalog of anime originals in general, and Gainax, obviously. But listen, right now, Delicious in Dungeon is going to be made by them. The trailer looks fucking fantastic, by the way. It is actually fantastic. We should watch the trailer later. again because I just love it. Winter 2024, by the way.
You also have to give props to Science Saru for them trying to be a little bit different as well in terms of like they'll have stuff that is either like obscure manga series or light novel series.
How are we gonna advertise Inuo?
Well, at the same time, it's also like you look at them trying to do stuff like Yurei Deco, and it's very different. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like wholly original because they do draw a lot of sort of like literature,
like social
inspiration.
commentary.
But at the same time, it's like it's definitely not something that you would say there's like a like for like comparison in any seasons of anime that have released in the last year. However, that doesn't mean that it is well received. In fact, the score for it is still very, very low. And even I, who am like, I am a diehard fan of Science Saru, I'll be the first to admit that this is probably one of the weakest Science Saru productions I'd seen.
I mean, Ong Young Choi can't always get W's, right?
It's hard.
It's hard. So it is such a difficult proposition that you rarely would get someone like Studio Trigger being like, hey, can you guys kickstart Little Witch Academia? And even then, they probably will take that fund or the hype and be like to a production committee and be like, listen, we raised all this money on our own. Why don't you help us with the other 60% of it, you know?
And let's also think about in terms of like other studios like PA Works with, your boy Kang Ming and Akiba Mate War, or like 3 Hertz with Healer Girl. It's Healer. That's Healer Girl, right?
Yes.
So like they'll do stuff that is like wholly original, or stuff that is based on manga or light novel series that may or may not be super popular, but have some sort of like diehard following, and they'll try and bring it up to the mainstream. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it's it's there. It's kind of just falling by the wayside. But at least you appreciate that they tried to do something that's out of the mold.
Yeah, and when we take it from a more Western, in other words, non-Japanese perspective, because we are not Japanese, we are not from Japan, nor do we currently live in Japan. Obviously, we consume a lot of anime and manga, but we do it with, at least for me, almost all of it is English subtitles, sometimes Chinese, sure, but those, especially manga, or let's take light novel adaptations, right? Those are signed officially by like actual English publishers, Kodansha, Seven Seas, Denpa, like Viz Media, right? But they lag behind the Japanese market, right? We don't know what the hype show, like what was it, like Manga ga Sugoi, right? Those mangas, a lot of it don't even like officially come out in the West. So we have to wait maybe sometimes even years and years before we even get a manga adaptation or even an anime adaptation for us to catch up with what is currently in.
Yeah, this might not be like wholly sort of like related to what we've been talking about during this BP, but that's another thing I sort of wanted to sort of discuss in terms of how manga and anime kind of break into the mainstream in the first place. And whenever we see sort of like stats and figures of how many copies of this manga are in circulation,
or New York Times bestseller, blah 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 blah, right?
The main problem that that I have is they don't really sort of disclose where those figures come from in terms of like, let's say like a manga series has 13 million copies in circulation. How much of that are these numbers just based on Japan? Are these worldwide figures? Or, like, is it because of the fact that I think, cause it's like, let's say, for example, like a really, really popular series, which I think, how do I go about this? Like, have you ever heard the term Galapagos syndrome?
Like the Galapagos Island?
Yeah. So you know how like the Galapagos Island itself is like it's an island that literally has like very unique and indigenous sort of creatures and animals that live and inhabit in this particular in this particular island. Galapagos syndrome, in terms of this, is purely like a Japanese term in a sense that what they do in terms of working on business, providing services, is that they look inwards as opposed to outwards. They look to serve the domestic market before even caring about what works in the worldwide global market.
Absolutely, that is something that I don't really appreciate or like, but that is also because I'm heavily biased as someone that is not domestic, right?
Yeah. Like, you want to get a piece of that domestic pie. You want to be able to see, like, yo, the Japanese people really love this shit. I want in on it too. Please share it to us.
I mean, how many times we have kind of lamented on Nintendo being really late adopting certain practices, whether it is a subscription service or whether it is an online persistent like Game Pass, all these things that they are very or for example,
think about, for example, Fate Stay Night. For the longest time, there was never an actual licensed English translation of the Fate Stay Night visual novel. It was
like
only
fan patches.
Exactly, fan patches, homebrews, like basically like people just like the fan sub community coming together and creating something, and unfortunately pirating the game. But then, of course, Type Moon seeing, oh, people outside of Japan actually really love this shit. Why don't we make this into a much bigger franchise and look at it now?
Yeah, I think in general, and this is very broadly speaking, the Japanese market and industries almost as a whole is very not xenophobic, but not very friendly towards, or they don't care, as you said, right?
It's not. I think for them, it's kind of the same, I would say, in terms of like other countries, other markets. I mean, for example, like China is very much China number one when it comes to creating stuff too, because of the fact that they don't necessarily need to depend on global markets. They already have a large enough domestic population for them to be able to release one product. And if everyone in China loves it, that's more than enough for them. They don't necessarily need to have dependence on another market to prop their sales. So the manga series, and now, of course, anime series that I was thinking about in terms of Galapagos syndrome is Kingdom. So whenever we see circulation numbers of manga and whatnot, it's clearly like in like the 20s, 30s, 40 millions. But how many of those numbers are outside of Japan? Because when we talk about some of the greatest anime series of all time, Kingdom always is there, but we never ever really talk about it. Now, I've watched a little bit of season 1. The 3D was really weird. I didn't really enjoy it.
With our seasonal bets, my anime list always has Kingdom, even though that has a low amount of like fans or
their
followers.
Fans are usually like in the low like six figures to maybe even only having like 60 to 70,000 people, but it will consistently
like 8
be
something,
8.5, 8.6, 8.7. So that's the weird thing too. It's not even like a dark horse thing. It's just the fact that if you're outside of Japan and you know about Kingdom, you probably are a die-hard fan of it. But outside of that small little enclave of fans that exist on Mal that want to follow Kingdom, I don't think the majority of the world outside of Japan know or even care about Kingdom. Well, but whenever you see it, if we do our little GAP seasonal bets, if Kingdom were there, you are picking it. You are picking, because 100%. It is one of the safest bets you can make.
I think also we are in a bit of a weird situation in terms of you and I, because we know about the three kingdoms just because, through osmosis, because we're Chinese, right? It is even harder because it's more detached for, let's say, someone that lives in suburbia America or Europe to kind of get a grasp of the relevancy of the three kingdoms. Like your boy Kong Ming, right? Zhuge Liang. We know exactly who that person is. Of course, it's portrayed with a certain amount of liberty, but we know the historical figure. Good luck trying to convince people, right? Was it Raven of the Inner Palace? Is a very gorgeous anime. I still need to like watch it and finish it, or like at least get my 2 cents in on the podcast about it when I do get around to it. It is such a hard sell for the average person to be like, an imperial palace drama and politics. But if you're an Asian person, if you're into like K-dramas, because a lot of K-dramas, Chinese dramas, Japanese dramas have historical dramas. That's literally a genre that, in some cases, has so much appeal, not necessarily always in the main focus or limelight, but it is relevant. But then if you go to the West, it's like, the fuck are you talking about?
Well, it's also like, back on Kingdom as well. As popular, as a story Three Kingdoms is, I don't know or even think that Kingdom, the anime and manga series, would be popular in China because, like you said, There are so many stories that already bleed into live action movies, written novels.
Like it's done to death, right?
Like you already have seen like a multitude of different variations. Like there's even been like a bunch of like Journey to the West adaptations in anime and manga, but we've also
Even
seen
in certain H stuff too, probably.
yeah, but we've seen exactly. So we've seen like millions and millions of adaptations from every year, every decade, like across like the past century of the rehashing, the retelling of the Journey to the West story.
Wait, what was that? Oh, fuck, the one that I actually watched like back in the day. The one that just had like a reboot, reload
With the Jeep and all that, right?
Yeah, shit.
Ah, I forgot. It had something. I'm sure it had the word zero in it, but I forgot. But yeah, so
Yeah, but that's irrelevant.
yeah,
Right?
I think that's something. I mean, like I don't really know where I was going with the whole Galapagos syndrome thing, but like that's something I feel we want to try and see if Japan is willing to sort of hey, maybe don't keep all the good shit to yourself. Send some of that shit overseas and let us enjoy it too. Because like you said, whenever we look at best manga lists or like for both shonen and shonen stuff, probably already know like 8, 9, maybe all of them because of the fact that a lot of them end up getting greenlit for official translations and circulations overseas. Whereas a lot of the shoujos, particularly the stuff that you like as well, a lot of times they don't have an English translation, like albeit even like an English name for their
or
for
it's
the
like
series.
6 years later, when the manga is legit finished or canceled, right? I would argue though, Will, despite agreeing with you a lot on this whole issue or the broad landscape of anime and manga in Japan versus in the West, right? Or the recycling of certain tropes or the shonen genre. I think though we also should be grateful with what we have because argument's sake, simulpub for mangas are almost, for at least for a lot of shonens, for Shonen Jump especially on Jump Plus Manga Plus, is instantaneous. A lot of anime simulcast is almost exactly like released at the same time. With obviously English dubbing might come delayed or in a lot of cases won't even happen. But in terms of the Japanese audio with subtitles in a lot of different languages is available the same time release.
Yeah, I mean we've gone over it before in terms of the proliferation of anime and manga, talking about how it's much easier to get access to not just anime now, but also manga. With all these new manga apps that come out like every year that allow for us to be able to digitally read or even digitally purchase and store our manga, even light novels nowadays. So that's definitely like a big step in the right direction. I think the sort of questions and problems I'm bringing up now are more just a result of us now being comfortable with what we have. What I personally wish to see more of, or maybe like particular changes that allow for us to have a more varied experience with anime and manga rather than just seeing the same isekais, the same shonen actions, seeing the same light novels and mangas getting adaptations for manga and for anime and so on. I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of me just asking for too much.
I don't think it is in a way.
But it's also like, is it going to change? Probably not. Right? Like,
yeah.
Because like you said, the industry will always go to where the money is. And then that's where it is. Isekais, shonen actions, if they're at the top of the scrap heap of anime and manga genres, that's what they're going to put their cash cow in. That's where they're going to be putting their last dollar and just hoping for a home run. Because all you need is just one person to say, you know what, like I'm going to give you like $5, $6, $10 million to make this shit happen. Let's go with it. Everyone's going to be rich off it. Okay, yeah. Sure, no problem. I mean, this is not an original thing. This is not something that is very different from what we've already seen over the last 5-10 years. But we know it works, and therefore we're going to stick with it. I think that's something that probably won't change in the near future because
Sayuki.
Sayuki Reload.
Sayuki Reload. Okay, so quick update. While I am paying attention to what you're saying, but I'm also simultaneously Googling stuff. So, when spring 2022 was the last season of the anime adaptation of Kingdom, season 4.
Okay.
Can you guess the score?
8.73.
Almost exactly. It is 8.75, higher than Spy X Family, lower than Kaguya-sama, which is 9.05, but it is number 2 in the whole spring season.
I think if we look at like all time, it's probably top 50. If not top 50, definitely top 100. Right? Like
41.
yeah. So
But popularity is 2809, members 52,794.
yeah. Not a whole lot compared to the series that you just mentioned, right? Like if the fact that it has a higher score than Spy X Family, but it is like significantly less popular, at least from a Mal perspective, than Spy X Family, that just kind of goes to show that sometimes it's not just being super popular, it's also just being like knowing like who your right audience is. I think that, however, it does mean that the general audience for anime and manga still gravitates towards looking for that next big hitter isekai, that next shonen action that's going to absolutely take over the world.
And they're duds too. Like, let's not forget, if I were to tell you, hey, Will, what do you think about Shenmue? You'll be like, oh, it's like this classic game
Historic,
that has a lot of hype. It was on the Dreamcast originally. A lot of people probably are yearning for something from Shenmue.
Oh,
it did poorly.
Guess what? Yeah, last 2 years, not only do you have a Shenmue 3, you also had a Shenmue anime.
That was bullshit.
Neither of them worked.
Then you get, let's say that, okay, then you'll be like, well, Shenmue is kind of weird.
I mean, there's also Yurusei Yatsura, right? That came out 20 years ago recently. It wasn't like terrible.
With David Productions, right?
Yeah, and like it wasn't like a terrible mouse score, but it definitely didn't, it definitely did not create waves.
And it got greenlit for like 50 episodes total. So it's like, what are you going to do? Then you get Doll's Front Line, probably one of the most well-known tower defense gacha games in existence. And their anime, at least from a Mal perspective, performed horrendously. Now, is there probably a difference between being ranked high on my anime list versus being popular? That's another valid and interesting discussion, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some level of correlation. It's never just like randomly. It's never like, oh, stuff that's super popular is not going to be highly rated, and the inverse is not also like entirely accurate either. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much like live action Western movies where it gets panned by critics, but it just earns a shit ton of money, and they just keep greenlighting it because, hey, it's earning fucking money. What are you going to do about it?
Like every time you get into like the summer, you're reaching towards October, you always have those big summer blockbusters, or people are preparing for that next big horror franchise. And let's be real, a lot of them are either boring or just complete trash, but they somehow still rake in like millions of dollars, and it's because that's kind of just what people want.
Yeah, it's like same shit, different day, right? With isekais, for example, or shonens. Maybe they don't want or need to look for something new and like, what's it called? Avant-garde is, I guess, the term, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at like the current slate of, Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, right? Like with Eternals, the more recently Ant-Man and the Quantumania thing, both have been panned for being pretty dog shit, or at least just like movies that people did not enjoy. They still raked in well over $300 to $400 million.
Yeah, of course. You could argue like, well, when you factor in the cost of advertising and stuff, do they actually
and stuff?
do they actually make the money back? Okay, that's a valid, kind of discussion, because I actually wouldn't know for certain things,
or at least we'll never accurately know.
Exactly, but going off of what you said about like, since we're on the topic of like stats, usually no one is open about their analytics and stats, because why would you?
Yeah.
Unless if it's to boast.
Yeah, like you're not going to be
shit on yourself.
You're not going to be like, oh, Paul Rudd, we paid him this much money on this contract to appear in Ant-Man movies. We're paying Tom Holland this much. We're paying, like.
I mean, sometimes you would get that kind of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Insider knowledge, but a lot of people won't tell you, for example, the budgeting that is spent on advertising, which sometimes is even almost close to half of the movie budget, because the movie budget is not factored advertisements, at least in terms of like the Western live action movie scene.
Very much the budget itself is purely production.
Right.
Everything else that happens afterwards, that's not accounted for in the budget itself. It's just added like sunk costs that need to be done to be able to propel your property, your service, and whatnot.
And the actors get paid a shit ton of money. And if we go now back to anime and manga, the production committee earns the shit ton of money.
But we also don't know how much they spend on advertising and marketing.
Yeah, and I think that is the argument that they could kind of give forth, because how else are you going to say they're wrong or right?
Yeah, like for example, like if it's like, are you going to spend $10 million advertising Chainsaw Man, or are you going to spend $10 million advertising My Home Hero? I think like that is not even like a fair comparison. You know where the money's going to go, but that's also just because of the fact that that's industry trends. So this is not necessarily like a question that needs a proper answer, but like, do you feel that the onus falls a bit more on the business side, which are like the management companies, production companies, knowing that like they're just perpetually like sending out all this shonen action and isekai because that's what they think people want and that's what they know where the money is? Or does the onus fall on the consumers in that this stuff is garbage, but you're still putting money into it? Or this stuff is, way too popular and there's, a lack of variation in terms of anime and manga, but because you continuously put money into the coffers of the people that produce the same shit, that's why we have no variation in anime and manga. Again, this is not like a be-all, end-all.
I understand.
I'm not saying there is absolutely no variation. I'm just saying that that's what we're trending towards.
Plus, we're two dudes recording this episode in a residential area rather than, it like, I totally get it. We're not
a lot of the stuff we're saying is not like founded on like actual like statistical analysis. This is all of our gut feelings.
Dude,
and
we want it, but there's no way we could get it, right? But it is our gut reaction. I would say there is, in this particular case of what you propose, there's a difference between who is responsible and who should be blamed. I think the consumers should be blamed for this,
like perpetually wanting new stuff, but not actually proactively trying to make that change, right?
Yes, and then I think the animation studios production committees are responsible for it. Of course, then
That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
Of course, you could say like, well, then who is the bad person? Everyone's the bad actor in this case, including yours truly.
Yeah, because we both really love Hell's Paradise and Jujutsu Kaisen.
And
I want Jujutsu Kaisen season 2. I absolutely want it. You and I paid money to go watch the movie.
Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Yeah, it's fucking dope. But so I think ultimately, if it is not viable, production committees, animation studios, manga publishers will not invest money towards it. How do you do that? Over time, it is through the fans, consumers, voting with either their wallet or their voice. And here's the other thing about the voice. I don't think a lot of people either care, or we make it out to sound like, or for example, we use My Anime List a lot. My Anime List makes a lot of noise, but maybe it is in reality only 10% of the entire anime and manga fan base, which is probably the reality of the situation.
Now, let me propose a final question to you. We've talked about the production side, which includes the businesses, the sponsors, the management companies that are involved in producing and circulating anime and manga, and then we also have the consumer side, which are the fans, the general sort of like layman that just wants to consume this particular genre. What about the people on the in between, which are for lack of a better word, content creators, people like you and me, people like Anime Man.
Oh my god, we're content creators. Holy shit.
Yeah,
Will.
I mean, we've been doing it for 2.5 years. We might as well actually pick up that moniker now, right? So, like, if we know that every season we're going to be inundated with very similar types of properties, that aren't like wholly original. We're not that we're expecting stuff to be super original. We've already said that it's nigh impossible to do that now. But if we know that the next big blockbuster hit of summer 2023 or winter 2025 or whenever in the future is going to be the next big shonen action or the next big isekai that doesn't necessarily break the mold from what has preceded it, do you feel that it kind of potentially creates a bottleneck in us further exploring the medium because we know that we're going to be subjected to stuff that we've already talked about in some form or capacity? Or do you feel that because of the fact that this is the way the industry is molded, that we naturally would have to just, fall in line and just like sort of commit to it?
As much as the narrative of anime and manga as an industry, as a fan base, consumer base, is the biggest and most relevant it has ever been, period, and it will probably continue to uptrend, once it gets to a certain level of quantity of people that is able to consume things, then that is, in my opinion, when a lot of projects become viable, because you only need like 1% of the fan base, or there will eventually, just by the law of numbers, have people that will then want to consume those types of non-shonen, non-action based properties.
Non-isekais.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right now, even though it is, as I said, as more relevant, as large as it has ever been, it is still rather small, such that certain projects are just not possible, not feasible, not viable, just because the potential audience that it is catered to is still small. 1% of the current fan base now versus, in my opinion, 1% of what it would be 10, 15 years from now is almost like magnitude of difference in terms of raw number itself, even though they're both 1%.
Yeah. Like 1% of people loving a specific anime series in 2000 compared to now, like, it is 1%. It's not the same number.
Yeah, I mean, let's take, for example, the magical girl genre. That is a genre that I somehow kind of dig, whether it is Madoka Magica to a certain extent, Revue Starlight, or just random out of nowhere Sinful Gear decides to also be a magical girl genre. But Precure is the most well-known, the most relevant, is in many ways the modern Sailor Moon in terms of relevancy within the subgenre of magical girls. I have no idea the fuck Precure is about. I have no idea how viable, how big the industry is, until like I dig a little deeper, and then I'm like, holy fuck, like they're making bank, whether it is through merchandise or whatnot. Like, it's just not on our radar. And then when the fan base becomes even larger, there's going to be these kinds of subgenres or niches within, quote unquote, the niche of anime and manga.
And so you feel that that's something that, as content
Comes with
creators, as content creators, that we naturally will adapt to, rather than, sort of, preaching the same praises for shonen actions and isekais, because inevitably the stuff we say that's good about, and what's good and bad about A shonen action and B shonen action and C and so on will be more or less the same, and therefore we then sort of break out of that mold and look at the more obscure genres or the lesser known genres and pour more focus in analyzing those things. We would then be more active in seeking out stuff that is against the grain, that's not in like the popular eye.
I do think as content creators now, in terms of the discussion we're having, the burden of responsibility, we have to do our due diligence with shonen. We have to cater to the hot button issue, the big bad in terms of the hype show.
I mean, think about how many times you've had friends come up to you and it's like, yo, I really, really love Demon Slayer. Can you recommend me stuff that's like Demon Slayer? How many like CBR or Ranker or Kotaku lists are there where it's like top 10 series if you absolutely love Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
And half of them are like, what the fuck? Okay, that's like a weird mental gymnastics type of narrative, but okay, fine, right? But you have to kind of do your due diligence because, for argument's sake, there could be a scenario such as, I don't know, Shield Hero Season 2.
Yeah.
That in many ways should be a slam dunk, but it fucked up, right? Because there is that chance. There could easily be a chance where Chainsaw Man or even Oshinoko could have easily like shit the bed. Thank God in all of these cases it didn't, but there could have been.
There was a possibility.
There was. With Doga Kobo especially. Like, I love Doga Kobo in general, but I was hesitant too, right? So it is like, do you want to, it's like not journalistic integrity. That's like putting me on a pedestal, but we're
not up for Pulitzer Awards, right?
We probably will never be, but there is that kind of integrity as content creators and the freedom of not reporting on the hype shows. But we probably should, and we do, and we will.
Because it would still technically be a service to the industry itself if we just actively choose to not focus, like, even shun this particular genre just because it's popular. Like, we're not trying to be like the whole sort of like left field. We're not trying to be hippie and whatnot. We're not trying to say like, oh, like liking popular stuff makes you a casual and whatnot. No, we're not like gatekeeping anime and manga to that level.
Yeah, we're not saying like, oh, you play video games, but you play only mobile games, then you are filthy casual. We're not saying any of that.
Yeah, we're not doing like the whole casual normie kind of like narrative.
And let me give you a little bit of inside baseball. I won't give you the actual number, but in the pantheon of the GAP podcast, our most popular episode by a mile is not about shonen, is not a genre analysis or about studio.
It's not even seasonals.
Yeah. It's about fashion. Like, what? Like, first of all, that's dope, but what?
I think it's because, people are already... You don't have to be an expert in anime to really know like why shonen actions are super popular, because you've been surrounded by it for decades.
Yeah.
Every generation has had its own big hitter shonen action, like all the way back to like the 70s and 80s. It's just that in this particular decade, we've just seen a lot of it happen more often than in the past.
And even with our recording/reporting, right? Well, we have spent almost very little time nowadays with our seasonal premieres on the sequels and the shonen properties comparatively to some of, quote-unquote, our lesser known, right? For us, personally, at least in terms of the unwritten agreement that we have, we like to shine a light on maybe like the mid 7 point whatevers on my anime list, because those are the shows that are not necessarily super obvious and apparent that you should check out right away.
Yeah.
The fives, fuck that, right?
Yeah, we at least try to shine a light on some of the more underrepresented genres. And then, of course, there are just some genres, some series that, unfortunately to this day, just don't work out. Like, unfortunately, horror. Right? Like, as much as we want to talk more about
I wanted
horror.
Muroko-chan to work out. And it kind of did, but it's just not that impactful. I'm super worried about Uzumaki.
And even if Muroko-chan was impactful, like, that's just one out of how many? There's not a whole lot that you can actually say. Can you make a conclusive top 10 list of horror anime and manga? It's really hard.
No, it's very simple. Anime. Let me just grab Junji Ito's catalog, and that's it, right? So...
Gyo, Tomie,
I thought Gantz, for example, as a horror, violent seinen, is a decent manga for sure. It has a weird look, it has a weird plot, and it kind of shits the bed towards the last arc to wrap it up.
Yep.
The anime, excluding Gantz Zero, okay? The anime is horrible. Like, just terrible.
Was Gantz Zero Polygon Pictures?
I don't think so. We can double check right now, but
it was 3D, right?
Yeah. But it wasn't like. I mean, you while you check, I'll just say that I think Gantz was a very good example of well, blood and gore and violence and this weird kind of sci-fi thing should have been apparent. What is it?
Digital frontier. We couldn't have been able to guess.
Yeah, there's no way. So how is it? I thought it would have been a slam dunk if I just look at like the bullet points in terms of the seinen, right? In terms of what you're asking, in terms of it still has a little bit of shonen action-ish, but it deals, especially the manga, has a lot of very explicit shit.
And also like really, really beautifully drawn empty spaces. Like, man, like the scale of which they try and create the world of Gantz in the manga, oh wow.
I have to also get used to the art style because it is such a different style that at the beginning I was really put off by it, and then I grew to kind of like it. But it took some time, and I think going off of that, seinen's relevancy is going to take time in order for it to kind of grow.
And I think it's because like we are like not even arguing about it in terms of like that the anime and manga industry still predominantly caters the services towards a younger population, because that's literally where the money is. And until they start seeing changes in terms of the attitude towards anime and manga, we're probably not going to be seeing more attention drawn towards seinen productions or genres that are underrepresented coming into the forefront, and then being the ones that dethrone isekais and shonen actions. I don't think we will be seeing that anytime soon. And it's because of that's just the way that the industry works, and that's just the way that's just something that the consumers want.
And we can pull up endless amounts of examples of, hey, this manga property is technically quote unquote seinen or more mature audience. It has an anime adaptation, but it's shit. Even though it is the source is ranked super high. I mean, one of the most modern tragedies that, in my opinion, is Requiem for a Rose King. It is.
I thought you were going to say Berserk, but yeah. But that's a whole different kettle of fish.
That one's. I'm not going to touch that.
The less set, better, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I will not argue about Berserk because that's just that's danger zone.
But Rose King, right?
Yeah.
You've shown me the manga. It looks great, and I think like plot wise, the way that the panels are drawn, the way that the story flows, done really, really well. But then you also watch the anime, and I don't think that I'd ever seen like a bigger face of disappointment when talking about Requiem for a Rose King.
Yeah, and it is really difficult to make anime, but it is easier at least. I'm not saying a lot of effort are not put in, because we talk about mangakas with their health issues, chasing deadlines, and going against impossible odds. But manga is technically a lower barrier to entry than anime. I'm not saying that mangakas have it easy, because they don't. But I'm saying that comparatively speaking, anime is way more costly.
And also requires a lot more people. One person could technically draw and write a whole series of manga, but one person can absolutely not do a whole 12-episode cur of anime on their own.
Oh yeah, you can just wait 20 years for one episode, or you know,
and you have to be incredibly talented in doing your voice acting at different levels,
or use AI and don't sleep or something. That I don't know.
Yeah, that we talked about.
We talked about that. So it is, and plus here's the other thing about mangakas in general, and I'm being very almost like not humanistic, like very ruthless and detached, right? How many series gets axed by, let's say, Shonen Jump? You know, we talk about Shonen Jump all the time, even within this BP. It's so easy for next person.
We don't even need to talk about it, because Mother's Basement, the YouTube channel, already does an amazing job covering the developments of Shonen Jump. We just need to watch him, and then
or Eye Patch Wolf, right?
Eye Patch Wolf as well, yeah,
exactly. But what I'm saying is, let's say you axe a certain property. There is like hundreds of people waiting in line to get their manga adapted. It's a very different ball game when we talk about anime, because just due to the sheer scale and the amount of people involved, you're not going to axe an anime production at a certain point, but you can axe a certain manga series, sacrifice the loss, and then see if like this other upcoming something called Akanebashi is relevant or not, because maybe it won't be, because it's about Rakugo.
I still need to read Akane Banashi. I promise I will get around to it.
But it's about Rakugo. Like, who gives a fuck about Rakugo in general? Like, I mean, even Rakugo Shinji.
Well, I mean, like Showa Rakugo. That's also a top 50 anime on my anime list.
What, Shouju Rakugo Shinju?
There's another one. Yeah, maybe that one. There might be another one as well. But I mean, for sure, there's like you do see subgenres that are very, very like obscure or just not very well known, but have a very like die-hard following.
But even within that Rakugo anime, it talks about Rakugo's relevancy in the modern era and how it's just not that relevant anymore. So it is such a almost like a meta commentary when we take several like layers deep or several layers out. It's Rakugo Shinju, I'm pretty sure, is the one we're thinking. Gonwa. It's like four.
Yeah. Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. So that's like, I love that show. I gave it like a 9.
8.73.
Yeah. It's a fantastic show that I think everyone should watch. And even though it touches upon Rakugo, it is very much an anime in terms of seinen, mature topics, and sometimes even taboo topics. But let's talk about Rakugo itself. Who gives a fuck? I'm not trying to like
demean it, right?
Demean it, but like no one will really know or care past a certain point.
But it's like, if we talk, for example, like there's a series called Ashita no Joe Part 2, which, has an 8.71, and it's easier in this case to, find
you're Rocky?
Yeah, to find some sort of connection with boxing as opposed to Rakugo. Granted, we're coming from a more sort of international perspective. We didn't grow up in Japan, so we don't know in terms of how relevant or how important the world of Rakugo is, just because we were never exposed to it from a young age.
One of the things that I always advocate is anime and manga, the topic or the thing that the cute girls do, the cute girls doing cute things, could be about fucking anything. It could be about handiwork, like with DIY.
Fly fishing with slow loop.
Exactly. Or it could be about one of the GAP cornerstones about fucking camping. Like, good luck trying to convince someone on paper, oh, it's about a bunch of cute girls doing cute things. Oh, okay, that genre is really good and popular, right? Okay, what are they? What is the cute thing that they're doing? They're going camping, and you just be like, okay, they go fly fishing. Who fucking fly fishes?
But because of the fact that it's cute girls doing that thing, hey, at least, there is some level of interest. And then maybe you'll be like, actually, you know what? Camping is pretty dope. I do want to go fly fishing now. That kind of shit.
Yeah, and then what else does it do? It promotes tourism. It promotes the people wanting to camp, just like how Slam Dunk back in the day or Captain Tsubasa promoted the sport itself, and then more people participate. Haikyuu, perpetuating the relevancy of Japanese volleyball, These are things that anime and manga has power and impact on. But almost all those things are shonen-esque, if not exactly shonen and not seinen.
Yeah. So where do we really go from here? I think that in the end, we are always going to be seeing shonen actions, isekais, really, really popular genres remain at the top of the anime and manga world, but that's not a bad thing. I think in the end, like if this is what it is needed to continuously push the industry towards the mainstream and get it at a level where when we start talking about anime and manga, that just becomes part and parcel with it, and therefore you then start seeking actively other genres, other topics within this particular medium. I think that would be a good way to go about it. Just because we have a lot of shonen actions and therefore and a lot of them end up being kind of similar, doesn't mean we're not going to shine a light on them. Simply because, well, one, they're usually really good for good reason, and two, it just helps us give a platform. It gives us a platform to continuously explore this world of anime and manga. It allows for people to be a lot more comfortable understanding that some sort of cornerstones in anime and manga are never going to change, and therefore it makes it a little bit
pillars, right? The foundation.
Therefore, it makes it easier for you to be like, okay, I know that this stuff is going to be great. This stuff's going to be fun, enjoyable. Maybe now is the time for us to go and explore something that is not in the mainstream, not within those rose-tinted glasses that you always look at when looking at anime and manga.
Especially when the well runs dry, right? I will, before I go into housekeeping, the one property that I think is very indicative of whether it was the trajectory of anime and manga back then, present, and possibly even the future, going back to another company that we have already mentioned here, Bandai Namco with Gundam. Gundam has been relevant since the dawn of time, especially if you factor in back when we were kids, the relevancy of Gundam's mecha anime space battles. What was it? Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Yamato space station?
Something, yeah.
Spaceship, battleship, shit. Anyways, it's a very well-known franchise. The point is, Gundam has existed throughout this whole pantheon of time, right?
Regardless of it, mechas being at the top or at the bottom, whatnot.
Right, with Macross kind of not that relevant anymore, but hey,
Mazinger Z being a classic, but you don't see any new adaptations. There is literally a new Gundam every couple years.
You get Gridman nowadays, but But okay, let's take Gundam as an example, as the last kind of thing that we're going to talk about. It is as relevant as it is now with The Witch from Mercury, right? And then if we go a little bit back, Double O, was it Hathaway?
Yeah.
It was on Netflix, or a lot of those franchises got revived, and then we go back to like pseudo mechas with Evangelion and stuff like that, right?
But what you're saying with those particular series is that those are all in some way, shape, or form mecha series, whereas Gundam itself is so prevalent and popular and transcendent throughout the decades that it doesn't even fall under the mecha tag anymore. It is just straight up Gundam.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, the Gundam genre has always been relevant with its own subset of anime and manga watchers, viewers, readers. Would you agree with that statement?
I mean, the fact that like outside of One Piece and I guess in a sense Naruto, Gundam's been one of the series that like legitimately you can't ever get away from. Like Dragon Ball Z disappeared for a while. Yes, they came back with Super and Super S or whatever new stuff
and
is.
it has that fighting game, but yeah.
Sailor Moon had Crystal and whatnot. But
exactly.
As much as they still have that legacy tag on them, you can't really say that Gundam is a classic anime because it's still very popular and prevalent to this very day.
And it's iterative, right? With The Witch from Mercury literally being the entire franchise's first female main character and hero, such that they made a huge hubbub about it, right? So they also argued that, I forgot like where I read that the franchise has earned a shit ton of money in modern era. So how is it possible that that's the case?
They tweak their formula every now and then. Not one single Gundam series is exactly the same as the one that came before it.
But if I were to show you a Gundam series from the 1990s, let's say I upscale it, let's say I remade it, but almost shot for shot, everything exactly the same.
Like Wing or 00 or...
No, even further back, like 1990s.
Okay.
Because I would say that 00 is still very much with that modern look, right? Do you think it will earn that much money?
Different times, man.
Exactly. And I think that is ultimately the case because different times then, or maybe the subset of people that are considered hardcore Gundam fans, is just ever increasing. Whereas now it can earn so much money, or you get that one hit with like 00 or Iron Blood Orphans, where it just literally, I would even argue that Iron Blood Orphans is a little bit different than your typical Gundam.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely a very controversial one because it seems just a lot of people just don't like it. I love it, but I'm also not like a hardcore Gundam fan, So.
I mean, maybe we'll do a deep dive in the Gundam series itself. It's going to be like a hard journey, but they earn a shit ton of money, and they've continued to earn a shit ton of money. They tweak their formulas, but it's going to be the same stuff ultimately in terms of the ground that it is based off of.
Yeah. So I think that going forward, we're still going to be talking about, the big popular series that exist at the top of this Mount Rushmore of anime and manga, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that we're always going to be continuing to see certain studios, certain creators at least try and push the boundary and release stuff that isn't necessarily, a shonen action or an isekai, and some will succeed, some will fail, but it's not for lack of trying.
Yeah.
I think that we're still very much in safe hands. I'm still happy with the way that the industry is going. It's just me wanting to ask for more, but I'm completely satisfied with what we have right now.
I think we're currently in the growing pains, like teething phase of anime and manga, despite them anime and manga as an industry being so prevalent for so long. It's actually not that long in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And when a certain subset of people, even though it is quote unquote hardcore niche, like the Gundam franchise, when it gets a certain size, you don't need a lot of those subset of people to consume a show for it to be viable, or maybe a certain kind of indie project. I will wait for the day that there is like this kind of quote unquote indie avant-garde Gundam, and I would just be like, fucking, we made it, guys. How is it possible? We fucking made it.
A supernatural mystery Gundam.
I mean,
a rom-com Gundam.
Okay, how is that gonna work? How about a Gundam space station, but it is a murder mystery, and aliens are involved,
and it's and like thematically wise, it's very Victorian-esque.
Yes, and it just so happens that one of the engineers on this space station is called Isaac Clarke. Just don't worry too much about it.
But it's a silent film. Hey, look,
oh, and every time someone dies, there's like an X.
Yeah.
Just like Gumtin Yat.
Yeah. Oh my God, Kindaiichi.
Yeah, Kindaiichi. Okay. Anyways, sorry, we went off track. I went off track with that kind of example, but who the fuck knows what's gonna happen? I'm so excited to know what will happen, though.
Yeah, stay tuned when that particular series comes out. So, yeah, I think it's time for some show notes.
Yeah, I don't know when this will get released, though. So
we'll just slave for sometime in the future.
So, I will not talk about the music credits, or we'll like slot it in somehow. But you can always reach us through our email, gapalette@gmail.com. GAPALETTE, all lowercase, all one word, using the handle @PaletteGood, capital P and capital G, all one word, or through our GAP Discord. Invite link is in the show description. We have a website, www.goodanimepalette.com, all lowercase, all one word. There will be music credits for this episode, and I will somehow, or will somehow slot it in, just because we're almost at the cusp of a different podcast season, so we don't know if it will be this one or the next one. But hey, regardless, thank you, Epidemic Sound, for providing our royalty-free music. If you're interested, you can always sign up using our referral link in the show description. Terms and conditions apply.
I didn't imagine this to go this long, but I'm also kind of glad that we did, because there was a lot to unpack in terms of just talking about the anime industry. I mean, I never actually properly sat down and talked to you about, like, what is it that we see and want out of the industry, how we want to at least sort of mold the future of the industry, and given its current state, like how it affects us going about creating content for the GAP.
Yeah, I think the creating the content aspect is probably another discussion, because we only touched on it slightly, and I think there is merit to really kind of go knee deep, balls deep into the topic. But I think as a general landscape of anime and manga currently, as like a time capsule thing or a commentary, is something that we legit never really, as you said, sat down and talked about, and it's always going to be a long one, because we covered so many topics that are kind of on, not necessarily on the deep dive level, but not on the surface level either, and they're all interconnected. So yeah, man.
We're not trying to say that we're like super innovative and avant-garde, and always trying to push buttons within the industry, ask questions that people aren't comfortable asking, but because we're both human. As much as we say, oh, we wish there were less shonen action, we also absolutely fucking love Hell's Paradise.
So stay tuned in 2039 when the GAP animation studio will release the anime adaptation season 4 of the Good Anime Palette, where it is Will and what is like the female name for William and Jason?
Wilma.
And what about Jason? Jane. So Jane and Wilma will embark on finding Picasso, the last painting of Picasso that is not AI drawn.
Oh. When AI has completely taken over the world and the last remnants of actual humanity have yet to be discovered.
Yes, because the code, the Da Vinci Code, is and it is what was it? Blue period, right?
Yeah.
So it is the fuck. I don't even fucking know.
We'll wait until 2039 to actually release that production.
Yeah, but stay tuned for that, guys.
Right. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening to this. Have a good day ahead, and we will all catch you very soon.
People are gonna fucking listen to this episode. Can you believe that shit?
And actually wait for this particular anime production that will come out.
No, but like for us talking about bullshit. I mean, you can just simply press the stop button, and then we'll just not talk anymore about it. So
everything is bullshit.
Everything is bullshit. Nothing is real. Everything is fake. We're all living in a simulated reality. Wake up from your needle gear, because SAO season 19 is coming out.
Yep. Take your blue pill or your red pill, whatever pills you want to take.
Just take a pill if you need it.
But don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs.
Bye.
Stay in school.
Hello, me again. Will.
Take two.
Yeah, take two. So we checked our schedule, found out that this BP is going to be released during season 6 of the GAP. So we do have brand new music credits. Jason, would you like to take it away?
Our intro music is Maybe We'll Meet Again by Baegel, and our outro music is Like the Ocean by The Big Letdown. So those are our BP openings and our EDs.
Yep. So we're not going to redo the other show notes. We'll keep it as is. But yes, this is us officially.
Got to give credits where credit is due, right?
Yep.
So
and now we will officially sign out. So
stay in school, though.